All right, get ready to dive deep today.
Great.
Because we're exploring the fascinating world of melanocytes.
Melanocytes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the cells that give our skin its color.
Right.
We're going to be focusing on two compounds you might have heard of before, L-tyrosine and L-DOPA.
Oh, yeah, those are pretty well known, right? They're the building blocks of melanin.
Exactly. The pigment that's responsible for all those different skin tones and hair colors and eye colors that we see.
Exactly.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
L-tyrosine and L-DOPA, they're not just these like passive ingredients sitting there.
Right.
They're more like, I don't know, like tiny conductors
Oh.
in an orchestra, kind of influencing how those melanocytes actually behave.
Oh, I like that analogy. That's a good one.
Thanks.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this research that we're looking at is all about. So
Okay.
let's start with maybe just like a little refresher
Okay.
about what we already know about L-tyrosine and L-DOPA in melanin production.
All right, walk me through it.
So picture this. We start with L-tyrosine, right? That's our starting material.
Okay.
It goes through a bunch of transformations.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key players in this whole process is an enzyme called tyrosinase.
Mm-hmm.
And what tyrosinase does is it converts that L-tyrosine into L-DOPA.
Gotcha.
And then from there, L-DOPA undergoes some more changes to finally become melanin.
So basically, L-tyrosine and L-DOPA, they're like ingredients in a recipe. They transform along the way, and then you get the final product.
Yeah, that's kind of the traditional way of thinking about it.
Okay.
But what this new research suggests is that it might not be quite as simple as that.
Oh, okay.
These compounds, they're not just ingredients, they actually act as what they call hormone-like regulators of melanocyte function.
Hormone-like regulators.
Yeah,
Okay, now that's interesting.
it is.
So what does that even mean?
Well, it means they're playing a much more active role, almost like they're giving instructions to those melanocytes.
Oh, so they're not just part of the recipe. They're like running the whole kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. They're wearing multiple hats.
So how do they impact those melanocytes? Like, what are the specifics?
Well, one of the things they can do is they can actually stimulate melanin production.
Right.
So it's like they're not just the ingredients, they're also saying, hey, let's make more of this stuff.
Wow, so they're involved in both making it and controlling how much is made?
Exactly. They're multitasking.
Multitasking molecules. Okay.
But it doesn't even stop there. The research also suggests that they can influence other melanocyte functions,
Okay.
potentially by interacting with certain receptors
Oh, wow.
on the cells.
Okay.
We're still learning about all the different ways they exert their influence,
Right.
but it's clear that their role is much bigger than we initially thought.
So this is getting pretty complex.
It is. It is.
How does that even work? Like, how can they be both the ingredient and the regulator at the same time?
Right. Well, that's where this idea of a substrate-induced autoregulatory pathway comes in.
Substrate-induced autoregulatory pathway.
You know, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, break that down for me.
Yeah, so think of it like a thermostat in your house.
Oh,
You know, when the temperature gets too high,
Yeah.
the thermostat kicks in and tries to bring it back down.
Right.
So similarly, when the levels of L-tyrosine and L-DOPA get too high, it's like they trigger this mechanism
Mm-hmm.
that tells the melanocyte to maybe slow down production a little bit.
Oh.
It's kind of a way for the cells to regulate themselves and keep everything in balance.
So it's like a self-regulating system within the melanocyte itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is that the researchers are suggesting that this kind of self-regulation, it might actually be super ancient.
Oh.
Like a very old evolutionary mechanism, something that you see in everything from bacteria all the way up to humans.
So something that's happening in our skin cells right now could have these deep evolutionary roots.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's pretty wild.
It is. It really highlights how interconnected biology is. You know, everything kind of goes back to the same basic principles.
Right.
And what's even more interesting is this research also supports this theory about how hormone systems evolved.
Okay. I'm all ears.
So there's this theory that receptors for amino acid-derived hormones, you know, like the ones that potentially interact with L-tyrosine and L-DOPA,
Mm-hmm.
they evolved from receptors that originally just bound to those amino acids themselves.
Oh, interesting.
So they started out simple, recognizing these basic building blocks. And then over time, they evolved to recognize these more complex hormones that are made from those building blocks.
Wow.
It's like a step-by-step process of evolution.
Yeah, okay, so the receptors started out simple and then they kind of graduated
Yeah, they got a promotion.
to recognizing those more complex hormones over millions of years.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, so we're not just talking about skin cells here.
No.
We're talking about like the evolution of whole systems in the body.
We're going deep.
This is really opening up a whole new level of understanding about these compounds.
It is. It really underscores how much we still have to learn about these seemingly simple compounds, you know?
Right, right.
They're not so simple after all.
Okay, so this is all super fascinating.
Yeah.
But let's bring it down to earth for a second.
Okay.
What does all of this mean for actual human health?
Right. Well, and that's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to dig into next.
Okay.
Because these compounds, they're not just ancient history. They have real implications for understanding how our skin works today.
All right, well, you've got me hooked. Let's talk about those real-world implications.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've learned that L-tyrosine and L-DOPA are a lot more than just building blocks.
Yeah.
They're like little messengers influencing our melanocytes.
Exactly.
But how does that actually translate into real-world stuff?
Right.
What does it mean for, like, our skin health?
So think about it this way.
Okay.
If these compounds can actually, like, regulate melanocyte function, tweaking their levels could give us, like, a whole new approach to treating skin conditions.
So we can potentially treat things like pigmentation disorders.
Yeah.
Like, could this be a game changer for people with vitiligo?
Exactly, yeah. So conditions like vitiligo,
Okay.
where there's, like, a loss of pigment,
Mm-hmm.
we can maybe use L-tyrosine or L-DOPA to kickstart that melanin production again in those areas.
Okay.
Almost like restoring that balance.
Wow, that would be amazing.
It would.
Giving people back their natural skin tone?
Yeah.
And what about the opposite?
Right.
Like hyperpigmentation?
Yeah.
Where there's too much melanin?
Yeah, so that's where things get even more interesting.
Oh?
Instead of boosting production, we might be able to figure out how to kind of dial it back.
Oh.
You know, like even out those areas where the pigment's kind of gone overboard.
So it's like we'd have this fine-tuned control panel
Yeah.
for melanin production.
Exactly.
Just from understanding these compounds better.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool possibility.
That is cool.
And it doesn't even stop with pigmentation disorders.
Okay. Remember melanoma?
Mm-hmm.
That serious type of skin cancer?
Yeah.
Well, that's linked to melanocyte dysfunction too.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So this research could also lead to breakthroughs in how we treat melanoma.
Potentially, yeah.
Or even prevent it.
Yeah. So if we can understand exactly how L-tyrosine and L-DOPA are regulating those cells, we might be able to develop therapies that can target and disrupt their activity in melanoma cells.
Gotcha.
Potentially slowing down or even stopping that cancer growth.
Wow, we're talking about some serious potential here.
Yeah.
From treating pigmentation issues to tackling skin cancer?
This is a lot.
It sounds like understanding these compounds could, like, revolutionize how we approach skin health.
And it all comes back to that basic research.
Oh,
Sometimes the biggest discoveries come from taking a closer look at things that we thought we already knew.
It's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly.
And in this case, what we're learning could have a big impact. For sure.
On how we treat these conditions in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes you wonder what other things are out there that we think we understand, but really there's so much more to learn.
Right. Like what other hidden depths are waiting to be discovered?
It's pretty awe-inspiring to think that even with all of our technology and advancements, nature still has all these secrets.
It does.
This research is just a tiny little peek behind the curtain.
It is, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
Like every new discovery opens up a whole world of possibilities.
Okay, so let's bring it all home for our listeners.
Okay.
What's the biggest takeaway from all this research on L-tyrosine and L-DOPA?
I think the key takeaway is that these compounds, they're way more complex and influential than we originally thought.
Okay.
They're not just passively involved, they're actively directing things.
Right.
And that has the potential to really change how we approach treating skin conditions going forward.
So these compounds that we thought we knew so well still have so much to teach us.
They do.
And the implications of what we're learning are huge.
Absolutely. And who knows what other surprises are out there as we keep learning more about them.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to leave our listener with a final thought-provoking question.
Okay, shoot.
So if manipulating these compounds can have this big of an impact on how melanocytes function, could this open up new avenues, not just for treating conditions, but for influencing pigmentation in general?
Now that is a fascinating question.
Right.
What if we could actually target these pathways not only to address like medical concerns, but also to personalize skincare in ways we haven't even imagined yet?
It's almost like we're on the edge of a whole new era of dermatology.
It is. It is.
Just from understanding these two compounds better.
pretty incredible.
Huge thank you to you for guiding us through this deep dive
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
into the world of melanocytes and L-tyrosine and L-DOPA.
It's been fun.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you'll join us next time for another deep dive into the mysteries of science
Absolutely.
and the human body.
Yes.
Until then, keep those brains curious.
Yeah, it really makes you think, like, what if someday we could have skincare that's tailored to your specific L-tyrosine and L-DOPA levels?
Right, like totally personalized.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what we're seeing with personalized medicine, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Taking off in other areas.
Yeah.
So why not dermatology too? Imagine, like, your skincare routine isn't just based on your skin type anymore, but like on the actual molecules that are driving your pigmentation.
Wow, that would be a seriously targeted approach.
Yeah.
But I guess we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, right? This research is still pretty new.
Yeah, definitely.
So what are some of the big questions that scientists are still trying to figure out?
Well, there's still a lot we don't know about like the specifics
just
of
that.
how these compounds actually interact with those receptors.
Or, other cellular processes. We've got the big picture, but we're still working on those finer details.
So like how do they actually flip those switches, inside the melanocytes? What's happening at that molecular level?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also the question of, like, what are the long-term effects? If we're thinking about actually manipulating these compounds for treatments, we need to make sure we understand what could happen if we tweak those levels over time.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, are there going to be consequences down the line?
Right, safety first, for sure.
Exactly.
You don't want to solve one problem just to create a whole new one.
Exactly. Got to think long-term.
Right, right.
And then, there's always that challenge with any promising research of how do we actually turn this into something that's real, that actually works for people? Bridging that gap between the lab and the clinic, that's a big one.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's still a lot of work to do, but it's definitely exciting stuff.
It is. The possibilities are huge.
Yeah, it's like this research has really opened our eyes to how complex these compounds really are.
Right.
It's a good reminder that even in biology, there's always something new to discover.
And those discoveries can change everything about how we approach things like skin conditions in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so to wrap things up for our listeners today,
Right.
what's the one thing you want them to walk away remembering from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing is just to remember that L-tyrosine and L-DOPA, they're not just, background players.
Right.
They're really important. They're influencing everything from your pigmentation to the health of your skin cells.
Right.
And really understanding their roles is going to be huge for the future of dermatology.
It's like we've discovered this whole secret language inside our skin, and we're just starting to figure out what it all means.
And who knows what other secrets are still out there.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to keep diving deeper to find out.
Exactly. The journey continues.
It does. Well, huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us today and for guiding us through this fascinating world.
It's been my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Yes, thank you all.
We hope you'll tune in next time for another deep dive into the mysteries of science and the human body. Until then, stay curious.
Stay curious, everyone.